Tomorrow there will be a final hour for the public to pay their final respects to the President before the President leaves Capitol Hill for the last time. The last soldier militant.
We are now switching to Dallas, where they are about to move Lee Oswald and where there's a scuffle in the police station.
Has been shot.
Lee Oswald.
Oswald has been shot.
We're going to switch now.
Police are pulling.
We're going to switch now to Bob Hoffacker down in the basement of the courthouse, who is close to the scene. Go ahead, Bob.
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot.
All right, I'm going outside.
They're cooperating, Dick. They're all cooperating.
All right, we're switching now. We're still looking at the basement entrance from the jail, from the Houston County Jail. And we're going to try to bring in Bob Hoffacker of KRLD. Can you hear us down there, Bob? Can you give us an account of what happened?
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. We saw no one fire the shot, only a blast from some bullet here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Oswald fell to the concrete in front of our eyes and immediately was covered by police officers who took him quickly, immediately, instantly from our sight. Police have ringed the inside and no one is allowed to leave. Everyone is being held in place and police officers are not even allowing anyone to move. It is mass confusion. Police are holding everyone in place and no one is... Pardon me. An ambulance is being ready to take Oswald away. Would you please get off? Just a moment.
Now, this is the exterior of the Dallas City Hall.
Right here.
We're watching this policeman guarding the door.
I saw a man there.
Now we're back downstairs.
He was a stocky guy, well dressed, with a hat. He had a hat.
Where did he go?
Brown hat up. I don't know. I think his coat was brown and his hat was
Where did
black.
he go, Pierre?
Well, he was here. He just sat there. He just put the gun there. I saw the flash on the black sweater. Oh yeah, right in the back. And the guy. Oh, wait, did you see his gun? Yeah. Right here. I mean, I saw the flash on the black sweater. That's what I remember. Yeah. The flash. The both were crouching. No, I saw him there. He was in the group of men right here.
Masquerading as one of us or what?
I thought he was one of the detectives. You know, he had a hat and stocky was well dressed. That's what I remember.
Had you seen him before?
I think he had his hat.
There were none of us in this area.
Maybe he flew up. I don't know, because I look at the flash.
There were no reporters in this area.
What? No. The trouble is I got to start. I can start.
All right, now that's the situation here.
The situation is now that Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. The man who saw the shot fired said it was fired by a man wearing a black hat, a brown coat, a man that everyone down here thought was a Secret Service agent. Oswald was moved immediately from the area. No one knows at this time where Lee Harold Oswald is. At the present time, word is that an ambulance is being ready to take Oswald away. We can hear sirens outside, and an ambulance apparently is moving down now into the basement. Here comes the ambulance, and Oswald will be removed now. The ambulance is being pulled up in front of us here.
It is almost unbelievable.
Here, someone has...
Stand back. Please, get back. Back. Okay, just get low. Okay. Pat, can you move?
Pat, move just a little to your left.
We can see now that police are
There you
hemming
go.
off
There
the
you go.
newsmen in the basement of the
Okay.
Dallas City Hall, hemming them off so that Lee Oswald can be taken to an ambulance, which was just brought into the basement of the City Hall. We're
Situation
switching
is
now to
that
Bob Huffaker downstairs.
Oswald will be moved quickly outside, and the only word so far is that the shot came from a man wearing a black hat and a coat. Here comes Oswald. He is ashen and unconscious at this time, now being moved in. He's not moving. He's in the ambulance now, and attendants, police are quickly climbing in. They're now having to remove the armored truck from the head of the basement entrance here. And the ambulance is waiting for the attendants to move the armored truck, which
This is the armored truck on the outside of the Dallas Police Department. It's being moved out onto Commerce Street, and now the ambulance is coming out. The ambulance with Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot just a few minutes ago as he was being transferred to the, was planning to be transferred from the city jail to the county courthouse. Now let's go back to Harry Reasoner in New York.
We have just watched a fantastic scene in Dallas. All preparations had been made for the very careful transfer of Lee Oswald from one jail to another, with the assumption that there might be some kind of trouble or attempted vengeance on the man. With all those preparations made, as you saw, he was shot in the basement of the police station. The confused reports from the basement, they got one man who saw the shooting. It was apparently done by a fellow who the people there assumed was a Secret Service agent or maybe one of the detectives. There was nobody down there except detectives, some Secret Service men, and reporters. But the first information was that the reporters were kept in one corner of the hall. Could not have been one of them who fired the shot. And this eyewitness said that apparently it was this man disguised, perhaps disguised, we don't know yet, as a detective or as a Secret Service man. This development, it fits the startling and momentous news of the last few days, but it would have been assumed that even if an assassin could get to the President of the United States in the streets of Dallas, the Dallas police would be able to protect their suspect in their own building. The television cameras were on. The event was being recorded on tape because it had been anticipated for several hours that Oswald was about to be moved. When most people in this country were watching the preparations in Washington for the cortege to carry the body of President Kennedy from the White House to the Capitol, in newsrooms throughout the country where there were television setups, they were watching the basement of the courthouse, and they were about ready to go there for what was expected to be the uneventful transfer of Oswald from one jail to another. When suddenly the scuffle broke out, the shot had been fired, all was confusion. Police pushed reporters back, police pushed each other around, ordered everybody to stand absolutely still. They had an armored police vehicle in that basement entryway, ready to take Oswald to the other jail, anticipating that there might be some trouble on the streets. The trouble came there instead, and an ambulance was sent for immediately. There's been absolutely no word yet on what kind of a wound it was, except that initially, Oswald apparently grasped at his stomach. An ambulance was sent, brought in, and instead of being loaded into the armored vehicle, Lee Oswald was put into the ambulance and taken to a hospital. He now wounded to some degree not known, just as the two men that he is accused of killing were shot on Friday. This is one of the rare cases where the kind of confusion that takes place when an event like that occurs is actually available on television. It was recorded on tape. The cameras were there waiting for what they expected to be an interesting but not eventful transfer. The police have become more and more convinced and more unequivocal in their statements that they have a case against Oswald in the assassination of the president. Dallas's chief of police spoke only this morning of new evidence. He wouldn't discuss exactly what it was, but apparently it relates to testimony. We're now going to go back to Dallas.
Police Department of Dallas, where Lee Harvey Oswald was shot a few moments ago. There's a law official out of our camera range who we're going to try to get what's being said. Okay, newsmen are being allowed down into the basement now. Those on the outside of the building were kept outside by police, and this discussion here has just been over whether they're to be allowed inside. The information that we've been able to get so far is that Lee Harvey Oswald, as he was about to be transferred from here at the Dallas City Jail, came down to the basement, was headed toward an armored car that was to take him to the county jail. He was shot. We do not know who shot him. However, the man who shot him, the word from down here is that he has been arrested. The weapon that was used to shoot him, the police have, and now the investigation is going on to somewhere probably up on either the 3rd or 4th floor of the Dallas City Police Department.
We're back at headquarters in New York. We got our tape. We have re-racked the videotape that shows that whole scene of confusion. We will now roll it, and you will see it as it happened.
This is the basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to concern photographers.
He has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Lee Oswald.
Oswald has been shot.
We're going to switch now.
Police are pulling.
We're going to switch now to Bob Hoppacker down in the basement of the courthouse, who is close to the scene. Go ahead, Bob.
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot.
All right, I'm going outside.
They're cooperating, Dick. They're all cooperating.
All right, we're switching now. We're still looking at the basement entrance from the jail, from the Houston County Jail. And we're going to try to bring in Bob Hoppacker of KRLD. Can you hear us down there, Bob? Can you give us an account of what happened?
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. We saw no one fire the shot, only a blast from some bullet here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Oswald fell to the concrete in front of our eyes and immediately was covered by police officers who took him quickly, immediately, instantly from our sight. Police have ringed the inside and...
You've just seen the replay of the videotape of the actual shooting of Lee Oswald in Dallas. Now we're going back for live coverage. They're talking to the police chief down there now.
He fired the shot.
How many shots?
Just one shot. Now then, thus far, Pat, is the man upstairs in the cell?
As far as I know, he's either in the jail or at Captain Fritz's office. I imagine he'd probably be in jail.
Do you know this subject? Do you know him? Have you seen him before?
Yes, I do.
Is he from Dallas?
Yes.
He is?
I couldn't tell you.
I know you can't release the name now, but do you know what kind of business he happens to be in?
Bob, I wouldn't want to say.
Right. Okay.
Did he have to be disarmed or did he give up?
We had to disarm him.
Did he struggle?
As much as he could, yes, but he was...
The struggle completely
he was mumbling. I couldn't hear. I couldn't understand what he did say.
Now, do you know...
Did Oswald say anything?
No, Oswald didn't.
What?
Now,
Did he have a pistol?
Yes.
do you know what kind of pistol he was carrying?
No, Bob, I never saw the pistol itself. Some other, I think Officer Graves had got the gun immediately after he fired the shot.
He was in civilian clothes.
Yes.
Did he try to get away?
No, he was immediately subdued by the
Well,
officers.
he wouldn't have had a chance to get
No.
away.
How many
What
shots
did,
were fired?
Just one
One.
shot.
Did you see?
What was Oswald wearing? Do you remember when he came out?
I didn't pay too much attention.
Did you know the man? Did you see the man before?
Yes, he did. Did
yes.
you...
You saw his face
Yes, sir.
and you knew him.
Yes, sir.
Pat, he is a resident of Dallas, is he not?
Yes, sir.
Would you
And that's
say
all
he
I'd
was
want to say about the man
about 3
himself.
feet away when the shot was fired, about 3 feet away from Oswald? looks like that about
We're questioning Officer Patrick Dean of the Dallas Police Department, who was standing beside me when the shot was fired here in the basement as Lee Harold Oswald was almost ready to go to Dallas County Jail.
I came immediately down the ramp to assist the officers.
Officer, do you know this man personally?
Yes.
In the line of duty or in another way?
Sir, I wouldn't want to say.
But he is known to you as a police officer.
And not as a police officer?
That is, you as a police officer know him, is that correct?
Yes.
Was he connected in any way with this?
I don't know.
Had you seen him here in the building before the shot was fired?
No, sir.
Pat, could you outline briefly some of the security precautions that were taken immediately before this happened?
Yes, sir. We thoroughly searched the basement. We had searched even the cars up on top of the pipes and things that a person might conceal himself. There was about 15 to 20 men that had searched this place prior to 30 minutes. In fact, searched it twice, about an hour before and then 30 minutes before.
How many officers did you have outside, approximately, would you say?
About 20.
About 20
uniformed
officers outside the building, and they are armed with riot guns, pistols, and all kinds of things.
Yes, sir. Some few of them are.
And you were then ready?
Before in here?
No, sir.
You haven't
Today, no, sir.
Not today. Is there anything else that you possibly might tell us about him, Pat? I know that at the present time you're bound and can't say very much, but you have said that he is from Dallas and that you do know this subject and have seen him before.
Yes, sir, I do know.
Is there anything that you could say about him further than the fact that he is a resident of Dallas, the man who shot Oswald, to shed some more light on it?
Well, Bob, that would be all I'd want to say, really.
I'm sure that's the case. Now, at present, what in the way of release is going on inside? How soon do you think we're going to be able to know who this man is?
Well, the information would have to come from Captain Fritz's office.
Now, Captain Fritz came out of this door just a few steps ahead of Oswald. Do you know where he is at present?
No, sir, I don't.
All right. Captain Will Fritz is the master interrogator who was carrying on the interrogation yesterday.
Security precautions have been taken. Were there
Merely
some threatening phone calls during the night that there might be some effort to take
I couldn't answer
Oswald's
that.
life?
I don't know.
Have you heard that?
This is the case here in the basement of Dallas City Hall. The information is that the man who shot Lee Harold Oswald was a resident of Dallas. He was a man known to Dallas police. At present, he is high above us in a cell where he was taken only moments after the shot was fired. The shot was fired directly before our eyes, and we saw Lee Harold Oswald crumple and then be carried away quickly to Parkland Hospital by an ambulance. This is Bob Huffaker in the basement of Dallas City Hall. Now outside to Nelson Benton.
You've heard a summary of the situation in Dallas where Lee Oswald was shot as he was being transferred from city to county jail. We're going to go now to the White House and Robert Pierpoint for the reaction there.
The reaction here is one of complete, stunned incredibility. One of our technicians, as soon as we heard the news, dashed into the White House, into Press Secretary Salinger's office and shouted, "They've shot Oswald," and Assistant News Secretary Hatcher yelled, "What?" and leaped for the television set, turned it on. Everyone just amazed and couldn't believe that this added tragedy to a day of terror, of tragedy, of complete, almost hopelessness here of trying to sort out this situation. I'm stunned, and everyone that I have mentioned this to here is stunned. I did hear briefly someone mention on the broadcast that possibly it was a Secret Service agent that had done the shooting. Well, I'm sure that I can guarantee you that that is ridiculous. The Secret Service is, of course, as shocked and upset at the death of President Kennedy as anyone else in the country, perhaps more so because they had the responsibility for his life. But by no means would anyone in this highly disciplined organization be a participant in something as tragic as the shooting of Oswald. This is Robert Pierpoint at a stunned White House.
We're going to go back now to Dallas and reporter Nelson Benton.
Just a few minutes ago here in Dallas, Texas, in the city police department, the 24-year-old man charged with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was shot. Lee Harvey Oswald was shot in the basement of the Dallas City Police Department. He was shot as he was being transferred from the City Police Department to the county jail. There, right behind me, had been parked an armored car. Chief Curry told us that he had gotten the armored car to transfer Oswald the 10 or 12 blocks from here to the county courthouse because of the nature of the prisoner, the nature of the crime he was charged with. Chief Curry also told us earlier this morning that during the night there were several, he did not say how many, there were several telephone calls made to the police department threatening the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. He didn't know the exact nature of the calls, and there was no information on whether any of the calls could be traced. Well, Oswald was brought downstairs. He had not reached the van. He was in the custody of police, and he was shot as he left the little foyer near the elevator coming down from the city jail. The word we have is that the man who shot him was arrested almost immediately. That the gun which was used to shoot him was taken. We do not have an identification on the man. Police know who he is, but they're not saying who he is. He's somewhere in the jail now, presumably being questioned. Neither do we know at the moment the extent of Oswald's injuries. When he was taken out, his pallor was ashen, but he was moving a little bit on the stretcher. That's the story. This is Nelson Benton outside the Dallas City Police Department. Now back to Harry Reasoner in New York.
In Dallas, the man that is being held for shooting Lee Oswald has been identified as Jack Ruby, 50 years old, a Dallas nightclub owner. He is upstairs in the city jail. As Nelson Benton reported, they have the weapon. As those of you know who have been watching, this fantastic event was being recorded on videotape here at CBS News headquarters. We have now re-cued the tape, the videotape of the shooting of Lee Oswald, and we will pick it up and pick up the narration in progress at the time.
And the only word so far is that the shot came from a man wearing a hat and a coat. Here comes Oswald. He is ashen and unconscious at this time, now being moved in. He's not moving. He's in the ambulance now, and attendants, police are quickly climbing in. They're now having to remove the armored truck from the head of the basement entrance here. And the ambulance is waiting for the attendants to move the armored truck, which
This is the armored truck on the outside of the Dallas Police Department. It's being moved out onto Commerce Street, and now the ambulance is coming out. The ambulance with Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot just a few minutes ago as he was being transferred to the, was planning to be transferred from the city jail to the county courthouse.
What you saw there was the videotape of the removal of Lee Oswald from city jail to Parkland General Hospital, apparently, though that's not confirmed, the same hospital where President Kennedy died. We also have the videotape of the actual shooting. They were gathered around waiting for Oswald to be brought down, and this is what happened.
This is the basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to concern photographers.
he has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Lee Oswald.
Oswald has been
We're
shot.
going to switch now.
Police up.
What you saw there very clearly was a man in a dark hat step out from the line and shoot Lee Oswald. We are now going to the United States Capitol and George Herman for reaction there. We got there was a picture of the area around the White House. Earlier, Robert Pierpoint said that the reaction at the White House was stunned incredibility that anything like this could happen. Repeating what we know, police in Dallas say that they seized Jack Ruby, owner of the Carousel Lounge, a striptease place on Commerce Street, about 4 blocks from the City Hall in Dallas. He is 50 years old. They have him there in jail. We're now going back to Dallas to correspondent Hughes Rudd.
The man who shot Lee Oswald has been identified as Jack Ruby, R-U-B-Y. He runs a place in Dallas called the Carousel Club, which is a kind of a strip joint and nightclub. He's been seen around the city hall for the last 2 days, and he was even handing out cards offering free drinks to reporters yesterday. He was wearing a brown topcoat and a black hat, and he pulled what appeared to be a small caliber pistol out of his pocket and fired point blank at Oswald, hitting him in the stomach at very close range. They have Ruby downstairs now in jail. No statement forthcoming so far from the police department. This is Hughes Rudd on the 3rd floor of the City Hall.
That was a report from Hughes Rudd in Dallas. The kind of thing that happens in an era of television down there as they're trying to collect the facts. They're still saying the man was in a topcoat. As you saw when we replayed the videotape of the actual shooting, there was apparently no topcoat. The tape shows clearly the man stepping out of the line in a group of where presumably detectives were gathered, firing the shot, and immediately being grabbed by policemen. We also have the videotape of Oswald later being removed to the hospital. So far, there has been no word at all on how serious the wound is. He was shot in the lower stomach. There was only one shot, as we clearly heard. Hughes Rudd said that it had apparently been a fairly small caliber gun, but presumably that there is too much to do taking Lee Oswald to the hospital and treating him to give any report on how badly he may be hurt. The word was from Dallas he was taken to Parkland General Hospital, the same hospital where the Secret Service took President Kennedy on Friday and where he died. In Chicago, Klein's mail-order house, from which Lee Oswald allegedly ordered the assassination weapon, has the model of gun that he used listed in its catalog. An Italian-made carbine, only 40 inches long, test-fired, ready for shooting, and only $12.78 unless you want the 4-power telescope, which would make the price $19.95. The first clip of 6 bullets is free. For a long time, there has been legislation pending in Congress to put some controls on the mail-order gun trade. Police in Dallas say that they have clinched the case against Lee Oswald pending this, and we have just now gotten the first report on his condition from the hospital. It said that it is very serious. Lee Oswald was shot once in the lower stomach. Police say that a man named Jack Ruby, a man who apparently is very familiar with the area around the Dallas Police Department, who runs a kind of a striptease joint and nightclub in Dallas, is the man who did the shooting. He's 50 years old. He's being held now. He was overwhelmed almost immediately after the shot was fired. This culmination of a weekend of tragedy was the last thing that was expected. All morning on the monitors from Dallas, we've been witnessing in the newsroom the preparations that Dallas police had made for this fairly routine transfer from the city jail to the county jail. It was the kind of preparations that you would make for taking a head of state through a hostile area. They had an armored police car in which to put Oswald. It was parked in the driveway in the basement of the police department. They never got to use it. They had to use the ambulance instead. And now, for a report from the United States Capitol, we're going to George Herman.
Always. Yeah.
Punishment.
We're having trouble picking up that remote from the United States Capitol. It's not even clear yet whether the huge crowds that had begun to gather to witness the arrival of the president's body a little later this afternoon have heard the startling news. In Dallas, Lee Oswald, who is described as being in very serious condition, is in a room only 10 feet from the room in Parkland General Hospital where former President Kennedy died. There are as many as a dozen doctors working over him. So the report we have so far only is that it is very serious condition. It's described as being very white by the people who have seen him in the room. It took only about 15 minutes from the time he was originally scheduled to be put into the armored car and taken to the county jail for all these things to happen and for him to be taken to Parkland General Hospital. The police who grabbed the man that they say did the shooting and that we saw do the shooting on that videotape all knew this man. We talked a little earlier, we heard reporters talking a little earlier to a Dallas police officer who could not identify him, but it was quite clear from the way he talked that he knew him. For a time, there was a suspicion that it might have been a city employee of one kind or another. But as we said, the man who shot Oswald has been identified by police now as Jack Ruby, 50 years old, a Dallas nightclub owner. Hughes Rudd reported he had been around the jail a good deal in the last couple of days, and that he had even passed out cards to reporters covering the story, offering them free drinks at his nightclub. Here's some more reports from Dallas. One of the mob of policemen who immediately overpowered the man who shot Oswald said that he had stepped out of the crowd and shoved the gun practically into Oswald's ribs. The shot was fired from less than a foot away. This officer said that the gun that fired the shot was right in Oswald's ribs, which might account for the very serious damage it did, even though there was only one shot and it was presumably a fairly small carbine gun. And now we are going to switch to the White House and CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint.
The funeral cortege has formed here at the White House, and the caisson is now rolling toward the north portico, from where the casket containing the body of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, will be brought out through the north portico and loaded onto the caisson. President and Mrs. Johnson have arrived here to be with Mrs. Kennedy. She will be riding in a car directly behind the caisson. In front of the caisson will be a muffled drum corps and marching groups of men, including a company of naval personnel, sailors, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Chiefs of Staff, the highest military honor guard the nation can provide, the color guard. This sad day is a beautiful day here in Washington. Bright, sunshiny, a little cold, but after the dismal rain of all day yesterday, the ground is still wet, but the sky is bright and clear. The cortege is actually to leave the White House in about 6 or 7 minutes from now. And along the horseshoe curved drive out to the northeast gate are lined up members of the White House staff and their families. Many of them who knew President Kennedy personally. They've come here to pay their last respects. About every 15 feet.
Robert Pierpoint is describing the beginning of the ceremony which will move the body of President Kennedy from the White House to the Capitol. It was assumed that this somber event would be the only major news of this day. But as these preparations were beginning, Lee Oswald was shot in the basement of the Dallas City Police Department by a man police say is an owner of a Dallas nightclub. He was shot as he was being moved to the county jail. He is now in very serious condition in Parkland General Hospital, 10 feet from the room in which President Kennedy died. Now let's go back to Robert Pierpoint.
Okay. About every 15 feet along the curved driveway leading away from the north portico is a sailor standing holding a battle flag. Flags of all of the many battles in which the U.S. Navy has participated down through the history of this country, including, of course, the battle flags that President Kennedy participated in, the battles of the South Pacific when he was a young naval officer on a Puyi boat. The caisson is now standing in front of the north portico, and presumably the casket is being brought from the east wing, where it's been lying in repose. The chiefs of staff of the military who will be marching as the honor guard, accompanying the president's body from here to Capitol Hill. The entrance to the White House is covered with black crepe. During the past day, all day yesterday and part of last night, the East Room was open to invited visitors to come and pay their last respects to President Kennedy. Visitors, including the members of Congress, governors from all of the states and territories, members of the executive and judicial branches of government, and friends of the president. There are 6 light gray horses pulling the casket and the caisson, and 1 riderless horse, which will walk behind the caisson. The riderless horse has its stirrups inverted in the traditional tribute to a fallen soldier. The scene in the East Room in the past day or so has been approximately this. As one entered on the south side, having walked through the White House, and along the way, a red carpet and sentries, honor guards, and then as one entered the East Room, an officer stood and directed one to turn to the left and walk down toward the casket. And there was a military honor guard stationed at each corner of the casket, which is flag draped, and a crucifix was fixed at one end of the casket. It was a very solemn scene, both inside and outside the White House all day yesterday, as people streamed in from all over Washington and from all parts of the country, officials and friends, to pay their final respects. And today it's the turn of the people. And outside the White House, right here, I can see thousands of them. Many of them have been here since early morning, standing silently, waiting. And I understand that more thousands are along the route from here up Pennsylvania Avenue to Capitol Hill. Originally, the plan had been that the casket would be in the rotunda for visiting by anyone who cared to come up until 9 o'clock tonight, and then again tomorrow morning briefly. But the White House has decided that if there are those who want to come, they will keep the doors to the rotunda open all night long. The White House has also requested that there be no flowers sent to the White House or to the funeral. We're still waiting for the casket to be brought out through the north portico and loaded onto the caisson. This wagon that was once an ammunition carrying vehicle and is now used only on occasions of tragedy such as this.
Repeating the fantastic developments of the past hour, Lee Oswald, the suspect in President Kennedy's assassination, has himself been shot in the stomach. Oswald was being transferred out of Dallas City Hall. A single shot rang out in the basement and Oswald fell over. He's at the hospital in which President Kennedy died in a room 10 feet from where the president died. He is said to be in very serious condition. He is getting transfusions. There are a dozen doctors working on him. He has not recovered consciousness. Police are seized the man who they've identified as Jack Ruby, who runs a striptease style of nightclub in Dallas. This fantastic thing happened as preparations were getting underway in Washington for the transfer of President Kennedy's body from the White House to the Capitol. CBS News will continue its coverage of that event and the events in Dallas in just a few moments. This is Harry Reisner.
This has been a special report from CBS News. This is a CBS News special report. The cortege of the president. Here in New York is CBS correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good afternoon. The removal of the body of late President Kennedy from the White House to the Great Hall in the rotunda of the Capitol building is about to begin, and we will be switching to Washington in just a moment for that. Just recounting again this morning's dramatic developments. As of the last hour, the accused assassin of President Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, was shot in the basement of the Dallas City Jail by a man identified as Jack Ruby, a 50-year-old Dallas nightclub operator. Oswald is in serious condition with a bullet wound of the lower abdomen in Parkland Hospital, the same hospital in which President Kennedy died. Now let's go to Washington and to Bob Pierpoint.
For the casket has not yet come out of the north portico. The military caisson is standing by, the caisson on which the casket will be transported up to Capitol Hill in the rotunda. These final hours before the body of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy departs the White House have been fairly quiet ones here. Mrs. Kennedy and the children have been upstairs in the family quarters. President Johnson and Mrs. Johnson spent a part of the morning at their private home in the suburbs of Washington. And then about 10 o'clock, the president received an intelligence briefing from John McCone, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, and from Presidential Assistant for Security Affairs, McGeorge Bundy. Still, we're standing by waiting for the casket to come through the crepe-covered entrance to the north portico. The black limousines that will carry Mrs. Kennedy and the family and the President and Mrs. Johnson have moved up directly behind the caisson. Catholic priests who've been praying throughout the night coming out now. This tragic day is also a very beautiful day for Washington as far as the weather is concerned. It's cold but bright and sunshiny. A large crowd of people have gathered outside the White House grounds, many of them here for hours, standing silently across the street. And the color guard at attention. And now the casket. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, leaving the White House for the last time. Mrs. Kennedy, Caroline, and John. Now the cortege is forming ahead of the caisson. The cortege, which is still forming here at the White House, will move down the circular drive at the east side of the White House and out the northeast gate. President Johnson has gotten into the car with the Kennedy family and Mrs. Johnson. That was not the original plan, but apparently they decided to accompany the Kennedy family in one car. And now the cortege begins to move down the driveway through the flags of the states held by an honor guard of sailors. The chiefs of staff, followed by the president's 3 military aides, the color guard, and now the caisson and the casket are moving down the drive, flanked by 20 military men from the 5 military services, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard. The caisson is moving down along a line of White House staffs and their families and out toward the people waiting outside the gates. And now the muffled drum corps has moved off ahead of the cortege down Pennsylvania Avenue. President John Kennedy has left the White House. His body in the casket moving down Pennsylvania Avenue now and up toward Pennsylvania, up toward Capitol Hill. Other members of the Kennedy family are still getting into cars to join the cortege, which will move very slowly because, of course, the front units ahead of the caisson, our marching units, are walking. There's the Attorney General's wife, Ethel Kennedy, and some of their children who will follow in a car in the funeral procession. Now the caisson is crossing in front of the Treasury building, directly across East Executive Avenue from the White House. The caisson and President Kennedy's body will come back to the White House grounds tomorrow, back down the hill from the Capitol and onto the grounds in a funeral procession very much the same as today's. And here at the grounds, Mrs. Kennedy will get out of her car, accompanied by the Attorney General, and she will then walk behind the caisson from here to St. Matthew's Church, a few blocks away, accompanied by former Presidents Eisenhower and Truman, the Chief Justice, and dignitaries who've come here from all over the world, cabinet members, congressmen, chiefs of state, kings, princes, all come to pay their final respects. The riderless horse following behind the caisson, in the military tradition, stirrups inverted for a fallen hero. I notice that many people who've been standing here waiting for hours have now somehow begun to release some of their tensions. Many of the women are crying now that the caisson has passed by the White House grounds. The crowd is not really broken up. It's still standing almost in stunned silence, watching the last of the black limousines pull out of the White House grounds and head toward the back of the funeral cortege, which has just disappeared around the Treasury building on the other side of the White House to the east, toward the Capitol. A large group of reporters now leaving the White House grounds, walking in the path of the cortege. The reporters had asked that they be allowed to follow behind the cortege, which is now proceeding up Pennsylvania Avenue toward Capitol Hill. This is Robert Pierpoint at the White House.
This is Dave Dugan at the corner of the Treasury building. The funeral cortege has just arrived at this point and is now making the turn to go directly toward Capitol Hill. The
caisson drawn by these 6 gray horses. A respectful quiet from all sides. People have been gathering here for the past 5 or 6 hours. They've been talking about John F. Kennedy, the man, the things that he said as president, and many reminiscing about the fact that it was just a little over 2 years ago, January 20th, 1961, that the Inauguration Day parade went along this same route. The cortege now making the turn. In the background, you can see the Capitol at the top of your picture. As people were reminiscing about the things said by President Kennedy, the quotation that came to most minds was what he said on his inauguration day. Ask not what your country will do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. These are the cars bearing the members of the family, the friends of John F. Kennedy. That's the beginning, the very head of the cortege, a police honor guard. And once again, you can see the Capitol in the background as the funeral cortege goes along Pennsylvania Avenue. While waiting for the cortege, everyone was just stunned by the shooting of Lee Oswald in Dallas, Texas. We understand he is in very serious condition, and the irony of that situation has struck everyone. That's the situation as we have seen it here along Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see the thousands of people who have gathered here on this beautiful, sunshiny day in Washington, D.C. for perhaps the most tragic event that any American has ever had to view. This is Dave Dugan.
All right. This is Stanley Levy in the old Washington Post Office between 11th and 12th Street on Pennsylvania Avenue. We are perched above the line of the procession, and now through the barren trees along Pennsylvania Avenue, we can see the cortege approaching. First, the Washington police. A murmur goes through the crowd. Here it comes, they say. Crowds have been waiting here for hours, clustered first at the intersections where the sunlight comes through. They are deeply packed from from the curve's edge back to the row of buildings. And now it comes. The beat of the drums, marching men, soldiers at parade rest along the route. Right, Bill. There's the Capitol, directly ahead in the line of march. And now the muffled drums, rows of drummers, 5 abreast, some wearing red coats. The crowd is strangely silent, intense, serious, almost anxious. No word of the incident in Dallas seemed to run through this crowd, only anxious waiting for the arrival of the casket. And now the single flag and the gray horses, and now the caisson, the flag-draped caisson, and behind it, the riderless horse. The caisson is approaching 12th Street. The marching sailors have crossed a path of sunlight, and their white hats gleam in the sunlight.